So, today's topic is a hot one, probably the hottest in South Sudanese political circles right now. The legality of the so-called crowning of the Crown Prince as first deputy chairperson of the SPLM and vice president of the Republic. Where do we even start? Let's start with the basics. The SPLM Constitution. The real crux of the issue is whether President Kiir followed the rules when he nominated and, some argue, unilaterally appointed the Crown Prince. The 2008 SPLM Constitution is quite clear about the roles of the Chairperson, National Liberation Council, and the Political Bureau, right? Article 25.1a says the Chairperson can nominate 3 candidates for Deputy Chairperson positions, but then they must be endorsed by the NLC. That's where things get fuzzy. Was this process followed or not?
That's exactly the point. Supporters of the president say yes, it was. They claim the NLC met in Juba, had a quorum, and passed the endorsement with a simple majority. But critics argue that it wasn't a valid NLC session, and that the endorsement was rushed or even skipped altogether.
And this brings up precedent, doesn't it? Because historically the SPLM has leaned heavily on formal endorsements. Look at Garang in 1994 and Kiir in 2005, both elected through formal party structures, not unilateral decisions.
Absolutely. That's why the comparison is striking. The critics aren't just nitpicking, they're pointing to a fundamental shift in how leadership transitions are handled. They argue this undermines the SPLM's legacy of collective leadership.
Still, the Constitution does give the chairperson significant power, especially to convene the NLC and push nominations. If Kiir followed that playbook to the letter, doesn't that make the appointment technically legal?
Technically, yes.
But legality and legitimacy aren't always the same thing. Even if the Constitution was followed, dismissing senior party figures and installing a successor without wider consensus leaves a sour taste, especially when those dismissals themselves weren't endorsed by the NLC.
That's a good point. Article 16.7 says the NLC has to endorse deputy chairperson nominations, but there's nothing explicit about dismissals. So we're in a kind of legal gray zone. What isn't expressly forbidden, is it implicitly allowed? That's the million-dollar question. And it's not just about party procedures. It has real political consequences. If the Crown Prince becomes acting chairperson or even acting president under the revitalized peace agreement, that's a massive shift in power.
You're talking about paragraph 1.6.4 of the RRKSS, right? Where the president can delegate authority in his absence. If Machar is sidelined, the next in line could be the Crown Prince, legally and politically.
Exactly. And paragraph 1.6.5 goes even further. If the president's office falls vacant, the SPLM's top leadership body chooses the replacement. With the recent reshuffling, guess who's the front-runner?
So this isn't just a constitutional debate. It's a succession plan in action, one that could define South Sudan's political future for years. Whether you call it a coronation or a nomination, the implications are enormous.
And yet, the SPLM Constitution is largely silent on succession mechanics beyond that initial nomination, which leaves the door wide open for interpretation and manipulation. So what does this mean for the SPLM going forward? Can it maintain cohesion with this kind of top-down decision-making? That depends on how the party base and the broader political elite respond. If they rally behind the Crown Prince, then the move gains legitimacy over time. But if resistance builds, this could fracture the party. We've seen before how internal SPLM divisions led to national crises. December 2013 is still fresh in people's minds. Could this appointment be setting the stage for another internal rupture? Possibly, especially if sidelined figures like Wani Iga or Kual Manyang start pushing back. But again, the quorum was reportedly met in the May 22 meeting. So technically Kiir might be in the clear. But politics isn't just about technicalities, it's also about perception. If people feel this was a power grab, then legitimacy suffers, no matter what the Constitution says. Couldn't agree more. The SPLM was built on collective leadership. If that tradition fades, the party may win the battle of procedure, but lose the war of trust. So here's the thought I want to leave listeners with. When does constitutional legality become constitutional theater? If the law is followed in letter but not in spirit, are we still upholding democracy? That's the dilemma. Legality without legitimacy is like a crown with no kingdom. It might shine, but it won't rule for long. This constitutional conversation was interpreted by Panlu Well. Follow Majok Wuchok on Facebook and subscribe to Make Talks YouTube channel.